By 5:12 a.m., the rain had worked its way through the seams of Isabella Nakamura's shoes, through her socks, and into the bones of her feet. And every stair in the Queen's walk-up felt 1 degree steeper than it had the day before. She climbed with one hand on the rail and the other gripping a torn canvas tote swollen with hospital paperwork, a cracked thermos, and 2 bruised apples she had carried all shift and never touched. 14 hours of interpretation had left her throat raw and her temples ringing with borrowed pain, the residue of other people's emergencies still moving through her like static. Intensive care, intake, nephrology consult, family consent. She had translated bad news into 3 languages and gentle lies into 1, then ridden 2 late trains home with disinfectant still clinging to her scrub top and rainwater sliding down the back of her neck. The hallway outside 4B smelled like wet plaster and old cooking oil, and the fluorescent tube above her door flickered in pulses that made the cracked paint on the walls look bruised. She had exactly 43 minutes before she needed to call Ren before his morning prep, and she stood there longer than she should have, fumbling for her keys because she had gone numb in that practical way exhaustion sometimes demanded. Then she saw the paper. A red stamped notice had been taped at eye level, the cheap adhesive already curling at one corner from humidity. Rent adjustment. The top line read in hard block letters, followed by an amount that made her blink once, then twice, then press her thumb into the side of the page as if touch might force a correction. Tripled. Effective immediately. 72 hours to comply. For a moment, she thought she had mistranslated her own life. She checked the unit number. 4B. She checked the date. Today, she checked the amount again and felt her chest tighten with a small, precise panic that sat just beneath her collarbones and stayed there. Her shift badge knocked softly against the paper as she leaned closer, and she could hear rain striking the hallway window at the far end in uneven sheets. City dawn still dark as midnight beyond the glass. Inside her apartment, the radiator knocked twice and went quiet. She shut the door behind her and stood in the center of the narrow room, listening to the old building settle around her. The place held the same thin inventory it had held for years. A second-hand table with one short leg shimmed by a folded takeout menu, 2 mismatched chairs, a bed against the far wall, and a refrigerator that hummed loudly while holding almost nothing. Half a jar of mustard, a heel of bread sealed in plastic, 3 eggs. The light in the fridge cast a weak yellow glow across her hands, and the backs of her fingers were chapped from hospital sanitizer and winter wind. She set her tote down and lined up her numbers, because numbers were concrete, numbers did not humiliate, numbers could at least be named. Rent due under the old lease, Metro card refill, electricity, phone bill already 1 week late. Ren's dialysis copay transfer, sent, confirmed, non-negotiable. After that transfer, her checking account balance sat at $312.40. And she knew the figure with the clarity of a wound because she had looked at it 4 times between subway stops. There was no hidden account, no parent to call, no friend with a spare room, and no questions. There was only this apartment, this rain, and the thin rectangle of paper she had placed on the table like evidence. At 5:31, she called Ren. He answered on the second ring, voice soft with sleep and 16-year-old stubbornness. "You just got home?" "5 minutes ago," she said, forcing brightness she did not feel. "Did you set your alarm?" "It went off. I was awake." "You were not." A pause, then a small laugh. "I am now." She could picture him in the Brooklyn sublet she paid for in careful installments, hair flattened on one side, one sock missing, textbooks and medication schedules spread across the bed, because he kept insisting he was fine and organized while proving neither. His clinic days had their own choreography. No added sodium, No missed appointment, no shortcuts. She had learned the rhythm better than her own sleep cycle. "You have your card?" she asked. "And your folder?" "Both." "Water bottle?" "Isa." "Ren." "I packed it." She sat down slowly, wrist bones aching, and watched rain bead down the inside of her window frame where old caulking had failed. "I wired your copay." Silence traveled through the line, followed by the sound of him shifting under blankets. "You didn't have to do it tonight." "Yes, I did." "You needed groceries." "I need you to stop negotiating with me like you're 40. He exhaled, not quite a sigh. "I can pick up another tutoring client. Your job is to stay healthy and pass chemistry. My job is not to bankrupt you." Her throat closed on that one, the same way it did when doctors use the careful voice families recognize too quickly. "You are not a bill," she said quietly. "Do you understand me?" Another pause, then, "Yes." She held the phone tighter, eyes on the red stamp bleeding through cheap paper fibers on the table. "I have a little lease issue to sort out this morning," she added, keeping her tone flat and procedural. "Nothing you need to worry about." "Lease issue?" "Paperwork. I'll handle it before I sleep." She heard the lie as she said it. Before sleep, as if sleep was still a reliable thing, as if this was still an ordinary problem with an ordinary fix. "Text me when you wake up," she said. "It's already morning." "Text me anyway." After they hung up, she stood at the sink and drank tap water in 3 slow swallows, then peeled off her soaked scrub top and changed into a dry t-shirt with hospital logo lettering gone faint from detergent. Her body kept inventory without asking permission. Calves knotted from standing, lower back sore, left shoulder burning where a combative patient had grabbed her during triage. Hunger came and went in waves she had learned to ignore. Fatigue stayed. At 6:08, she opened her laptop and pulled up her lease file. Old emails, payment confirmations, every digital thread that might matter if this became a legal fight. She had worked enough overnight consults with frightened families to know the first rule of survival in systems built to wear people down. Document early, document cleanly, never depend on memory when power belonged to someone else. She scanned the notice, time-stamped it, uploaded it to cloud storage, then forwarded copies to 2 folders she used for critical records. One was labeled Ren Medical. The other was labeled Housing. She added a new subfolder, Voss Notice 1. The name looked too formal for the panic beneath it, but the act of naming steadied her pulse by a fraction. At 6:26, she opened her banking app again, then shut it before it could recalculate her fear. She tore the 2 bruised apples from her tote, sliced away the soft spots with a paring knife, and wrapped half in wax paper for later. The clock over the stove clicked forward with an uneven tick. Outside, tires hissed over wet pavement. Somewhere below, a delivery truck idled, then pulled away. By 7:03, dawn had turned the rain from black to steel gray, and her building's front hallway carried the echo of neighbors leaving for day shifts. Boots on stairs, muffled coughs, a stroller wheel catching on the cracked second-step lip. Isabella watched from behind her curtain as Mrs. Cardenas from 2A hurried out with a plastic poncho over her nurse aide uniform, and Mr. Yoon from 5C shuffled toward the bus stop with his collar turned up and one hand braced against the rail. People who worked too much and slept too little and still said good morning because decency was one of the few things they still controlled. If the rent had tripled for all of them, this was disaster. If it had tripled only for her, this was targeting. Neither possibility left room to breathe. She checked the notice again for legal language and found what she expected. Vague references to market correction, no itemized basis, no disclosed hearing window, and a compliance deadline built to trigger panic decisions. 72 hours was not administration. It was pressure. Her phone buzzed with an alert from the transfer service confirming Ren's payment had settled. A second alert followed from her utility provider. Final reminder: past due. She set the phone face down and pressed both palms into the table until the tremor in her fingers eased. At 7:41, she called the tenant's legal hotline she had once translated for during a volunteer clinic shift. A recorded menu guided her through 5 options, 3 disclaimers, and 1 hold cue long enough for the tea kettle to whistle itself dry. When a human voice finally answered, the woman sounded kind and exhausted in equal measure. "We can do intake this afternoon," the advocate said. "Earliest callback window is between 2 and 6. Preserve all written notices. Do not sign anything under pressure. If there are verbal threats, document date and time." Is a tripled rent demand with 72 hours even legal? It depends on your lease terms and filing status. Based on what you're describing, there are red flags. Red flags. Bureaucratic language for predatory conduct. Isabella wrote down every instruction in tight block print and thanked the woman twice. 3 days into October, she had promised herself she would not cry over paperwork again. That private vow lasted until 8:02, when she tried to lace her shoes for the trip to the leasing office and realized her hands were shaking too hard to thread the eyelets on the first try. She sat back on the edge of the bed, breathing through the surge, counting in 4s the way an ER nurse had taught a panicked teenager at 2 a.m. last winter. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Repeat until your body believed what your mind already knew. She looked at herself in the mirror, nailed crooked beside the door. Dark hair twisted into a loose knot. Skin pale with fatigue, crescent shadows under both eyes. Clean scrub pants swapped for black jeans still damp at the hem. Not polished, not impressive, not fragile either. Keys, phone, folder. She tucked the red notice into a clear plastic sleeve, slid it into her bag, and checked that her charger and ID were still in the side pocket. As she opened the apartment door, the hallway light buzzed and dimmed, then brightened again. Rain winded through the stairwell, cold and metallic. Down on the street, the city was already loud with survival. Isabella pulled her coat tight across her chest and started down the stairs, carrying the paper that could break her month, her brother's treatment plan, and the thin, stubborn certainty that if someone meant to corner her, they were going to have to do it while she was standing. The stairwell smelled of rust and wet cement, and each landing carried a different layer of someone else's mourning. Fried onions from 3C, bleach from 2B, stale cigarettes from the lobby. Isabella kept one hand on the rail and descended with careful, deliberate steps because her knees had started to tremble. Not from fear yet, but from the long shift still lodged in her muscles. When she pushed through the building's front door, rain struck her face sideways, sharp and cold, and she turned her collar up as she crossed the block toward the subway. By 8:19 a.m., she stood beneath the overhang of Voss Residential Holdings, rainwater dripping from the edge of her coat onto polished stone the color of old ivory. The leasing office sat behind a glass frontage so clear it looked like an aquarium for rich people. Cream marble floors, brass trim, orchids arranged with mathematical symmetry, and a chandelier that reflected in the windows like fractured ice. Inside, men in dark coats checked phones that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. A woman in a fitted blazer accepted espresso from a staff member without looking up. Nobody appeared wet. Nobody appeared hurried. Isabella stepped in, and the warmth hit her immediately, dry and perfumed with expensive cologne and cedar polish. Her shoes left dull rain marks across the marble. The receptionist lifted her eyes, took in Isabella's damp hem, canvas tote, and a hospital badge clipped to her coat zipper, and then offered a professional smile that stopped a fraction short of kind. "Do you have an appointment?" "I'm here about a rent adjustment notice for Unit 4B at Linden Court," Isabella said, sliding the plastic sleeve with the red stamped paper across the counter. "I need to speak with Mr. Voss today." The receptionist scanned the notice, fingers still, expression neutral. "One moment." She made a call in a low voice. Isabella caught pieces. "Yes, she's here. Unit 4B, understood." The woman replaced the receiver, eyes settling briefly on Isabella's face with something like caution. "Mr. Voss can see you now." The office door at the far end opened before Isabella reached it. Gregory Voss stood in the frame as if he had timed his entrance to the second. His suit was midnight blue, tailored within an inch of theater, his tie fixed with a silver bar that flashed when he moved. He smiled with all the smooth confidence of someone who had never had to ask a utility company for another week. "Ms. Nakamura," he said, "please, come in." His office looked less like a workplace than a private club lounge. Dark wood paneling, framed city maps, shelves lined with legal volumes that showed little sign of use, and a floor-to-ceiling window streaked with rain. Two men sat at a side table near the window, both in charcoal suits, both holding slim leather portfolios. They did not stand when she entered. One glanced at her once, then returned to his phone as if she were a delayed delivery. Isabella stayed near the door. "I received a notice this morning, tripling my rent effective immediately. There has to be a mistake." "No mistake." Voss gestured toward a chair, but remained standing, controlling the angle, forcing her to either sit lower or stand as the only one without a place. She stayed on her feet. "Market conditions changed. The adjustment is legal under revised valuation guidance." "There is no revised valuation clause in my lease," she said, her voice steady because she had practiced steadiness for years in hospital rooms where panic had no use. "And 72 hours is coercive, not administrative." The men by the window went still enough to make it clear they were listening now. Voss tilted his head, smile still in place. "Strong language." "Accurate language." He moved behind his desk and picked up a folder Isabella had never seen before. Her name was printed on a tab in clean black lettering. He opened it slowly, like he was beginning a lecture. "You've been a reliable tenant," he said. "Late once last year. Corrected within 5 days." A page turned. "Employment, medical interpreter, rotating shifts, family transfer payments, interesting profile." Her skin prickled. "How do you have family transfer records?" He ignored the question. "Current liquid balance, $312.40 as of early this morning." He looked up and let the numbers sit in the air between them. "You're in no position to litigate." Heat climbed her neck, not from shame alone, but from violation so sharp it made her fingers numb. The investors glanced toward each other. One of them gave a low, humorless exhale that might have been a laugh. "That information was pulled without consent," she said. Voss rested both palms on the desk. Polite voice untouched. "Everything I review is obtained through compliant channels." "Then provide the channel in writing." He smiled wider, and the expression finally showed its edge. "You're very procedural for someone on borrowed time." The rain battered the windows harder. Somewhere beyond the office door, a phone rang twice and stopped. Isabella adjusted her grip on the plastic sleeve to stop her hand from shaking. "I'm asking for legal basis, written verification, and a formal hearing window," she said. "Today." "Today?" His gaze dropped to her tote where the torn seam had split wider, exposing the corner of her lunch container. Ms. Nakamura, you are not negotiating from leverage. One of the men near the window spoke for the first time, voice dry. Gregory, we're already behind. Voss lifted a finger without looking back, silencing him. Then he stepped around the desk, close enough for Isabella to smell his cologne over the cedar. There are other payment arrangements for cooperative tenants, he said softly. Flexible options, if we maintain trust. The sentence was phrased like customer service and landed like a hand closing around her throat. Isabella took one measured step back, refusing to yield more than that. I want communication in writing, she said. That can be arranged. Sign an acknowledgement first. He tapped a clipboard on the side table. Confidentiality language, standard. She didn't touch it. I don't sign documents I haven't reviewed with counsel. For the first time, the smile dropped. Not fully, just enough to reveal the irritation underneath. Counsel costs money. I'm aware. His jaw shifted once, a quick muscle jump near his cheek. Then you have 72 hours to become practical. He turned toward the door and opened it, dismissing her with theatrical courtesy. Isabella walked out with her spine straight and her stomach knotted so tight she felt lightheaded. As she passed the reception desk, she saw the building valet standing beside a luggage cart loaded with boxed welcome gifts. He looked no older than 22. His hands shook hard enough to rattle the cart handle, and he stared at the floor like eye contact itself might be punishable. The receptionist did not look up, but Isabella caught the motion anyway. The woman's phone sliding under the desk, the second Isabella approached. Screen still lit. Hidden, then gone. Outside, rain and traffic swallowed her as soon as the door closed. She walked 3 blocks before ducking under a pharmacy awning and bracing one palm against the brick wall. Her breath came fast, shallow, wrong. $312.40. He had said it like a verdict. She took out her phone, opened a notes app, and began writing in clipped, factual lines. Date, exact time, names if known, witness descriptions, quoted statements. Other payment arrangements for cooperative tenants. Counsel costs money. Every word she could remember, while memory still burned. At 11:06 a.m., she called the tenant's hotline again and asked to amend her intake report with possible financial privacy violations and coercive language. The advocate from earlier recognized her voice. Document everything. Do not meet him alone. If he contacts you directly, preserve the message. We can connect you with an attorney by late afternoon. Please do, Isabella said. Her throat felt scraped raw. And I need to know if background screening can legally include live account balances. It cannot, not in the way you're describing. We'll flag it. The call ended. She stood in rain mist and car exhaust for another minute, phone cooling in her hand, then forced herself toward the train because standing still would only let fear build volume. By mid-afternoon, the storm had thinned to a gray drizzle, but the sky stayed low and metallic. Isabella made it home, changed into dry clothes, and tried to sleep for 2 hours before her evening remote translation assignment. She managed 40 minutes. Every time she drifted, she saw Voss's face as he read her balance aloud, and woke with her heart thudding against her ribs. At 5:34 p.m., the attorney referred through the hotline called from a Brooklyn number. Her name was Marta Levin, her voice brisk and unsentimental. She asked precise questions, interrupted when Isabella slipped into apology, and told her to email every document immediately. Do not sign anything, Marta said. Do not go to his office alone again. If there are implied sexual terms tied to housing, that's coercion. We can move for emergency relief if he escalates. He already has, Isabella said. I think he selected me because I'm alone. That may be true. It may also mean he's done this before. Keep records clean. When the call ended, Isabella forwarded scanned files, screenshots, and the timeline she had drafted under the pharmacy awning. She included one extra detail she almost left out: the valet's shaking hands, the receptionist hiding her phone. Distinctive details mattered. In hospital cases, odd details often became the hinge. Evening settled by degrees. The hallway outside 4B filled with ordinary sounds: someone's television game show laughter, pressure cooker whistles, a toddler reciting alphabet fragments from 3A. Then the routine quiet after dinner, when tired people conserved energy for tomorrow. Isabella heated the last 2 eggs with rice and soy sauce, ate half, packed half for Wren's visit at the clinic, and set alarms for her overnight shift. At 9:12 p.m., a new email arrived from Voss Residential. Notice of non-compliance. The tone was formal, sterile, and unmistakably threatening. She had failed to engage in remediation options. She was advised to respond with full cooperation. Attached was a PDF acknowledgement form, identical to the clipboard page she had refused. She forwarded it to Marta without comment and archived the original in Voss Notice 2. By 10:40 p.m., rain returned hard enough to hiss against the window glass. Wind pushed under the sill in thin, cold drafts that stirred the corner of the red notice still pinned beneath a magnet on her fridge. Isabella sat at the table with a mug of instant broth gone lukewarm, laptop open, headset ready for her midnight assignment. She reread Marta's last text twice. If direct contact occurs, do not engage alone. Call me, then call 911 if immediate threat. At 11:03, the hallway light outside her door clicked off. That happened sometimes, but usually it came back in seconds with a buzz. This time, it stayed dark. She waited, listened. Nothing except rain and the radiator's uneven tapping. Then footsteps entered the hallway, slow and measured, one set only. They stopped directly outside 4B. Isabella set her mug down without sound and moved to the door, not touching it, not breathing for a count of 5. Through the old wood and the narrow strip of weathering at the frame, she could hear fabric shift, a faint scrape, then silence that stretched until her skin tightened. A shadow crossed the thin band of light at the bottom of the door and remained there, still as a held breath. Isabella stood 2 steps back from the lock, phone already in her hand, and felt the tiny muscles along her spine tighten one by one. The hallway outside carried no elevator hum, no neighbor voices, no television static leaking under doors. Even the building's usual groans seemed to pause. She opened Marta Levin's last text thread, typed, "Someone is outside 4B hall, light out." No knock yet, and hovered over send as the shadow shifted once, heel to toe, a quiet transfer of weight that sounded practiced rather than uncertain. A soft rap followed. 2 knocks. Polite. "Ms. Nakamura?" a man said through the wood, voice smooth, almost amused. "Building management. We need to discuss your non-compliance notice." She recognized him at once. Gregory Voss never raised his volume. He arranged it. She sent the text to Marta, then took one silent step to the side where the wall gave her partial cover from the peephole. "It's after 11, she said. "Send any communication by email." Email has not produced cooperation. Rain hammered the windows at the end of the corridor, and a draft moved under her door, cold enough to sting her ankles through her socks. She unlocked her phone again and opened the emergency folder she used for difficult hospital encounters. Timestamp app, memo app, camera shortcut. Her thumb shook once, then steadied. "Leave," she said. "Now." A pause. Fabric brushed the door. "I'm trying to help you avoid consequences." The hallway light snapped on and off twice in quick succession, then went dark again. 1 second later, her apartment died with it. Refrigerator hum gone, router lights gone. The old clock above the stove blanked to nothing. Darkness swallowed the room so completely that for a moment she saw only rain-gloss reflections from the window and her own pale hands suspended in black. Her throat closed. She forced air in through her nose. "Power issue," Voss called, voice carrying down the hall as if addressing the floor, not her. "You should come out so we can resolve this." Isabella backed toward the table until her hip struck its edge. The phone screen lit her fingers blue-white. No cell bars for a heartbeat, then one weak bar, then none. She moved near the window and got signal again. She tapped record and started a voice memo, speaking low and precise. 11:14 p.m. Unit 4B. Gregory Voss outside door. Hallway and apartment power cut after refusal of contact. From outside came a faint scrape near the lock, metallic and deliberate. Not a key. Tool on metal. She grabbed her coat and folder by touch, shoved her feet into wet shoes without lacing, and headed for the fire stair exit at the back of the kitchenette. The rear door stuck in damp weather. Tonight it opened on the first pull, which scared her more than resistance would have. She slipped into the service corridor and shut it quietly behind her, heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her gums. On the other side of the door, she heard her apartment knob turn once, then stop. In the service corridor, the emergency bulb glowed dim orange, throwing rust-colored shadows over peeling paint. She took the stairs down one flight, keeping to the wall, and paused at the landing where cracked glass gave a narrow view into the main stairwell. A shape moved above, descending. Voss. Coat open, phone in one hand. The posture of a man, taking his time because he believed timing belonged to him. At 11:47 p.m., the storm hit hard enough to rattle the stairwell windows in their frames. And Voss stepped into the landing below her as if he had known exactly where she would run. He planted one hand on the railing, blocking the only clear route to the lobby. "There you are," he said. "You're making this theatrical." She retreated one step and hit concrete. No room left. "Move," she said. 3 months cleared, quietly. "You come to my penthouse office tonight, we reset your account, and this disappears." He looked at her coat, her unlaced shoes, the folder pressed to her chest. "Or we proceed formally, and you lose the unit by Monday." The stairwell smelled of wet metal and old dust. Isabella's palms turned slick. Her body wanted to freeze, to preserve heat, to wait for impact and call that survival. She felt the paralysis starting in her calves and made herself act through it. She opened the translation app she had customized for emergency triage at the hospital, the one with the hidden macro she'd built after a nurse had asked for a way to document threats while hands were busy. One swipe armed live transcription. A second swipe pushed simultaneous upload to preset contacts. She had programmed Marta's intake address that afternoon. On instinct and memory, she had added one more destination 20 minutes ago. The compliance inbox of DeSantis Maritime Logistics, because she recognized 2 shell company names from contracts she once interpreted, and Voss had mentioned valuation guidance tied to those files. If the inbox was monitored, someone with leverage would see it. If it wasn't, she lost nothing but a battery percentage. She held the phone near her collarbone and spoke in the clipped interpreter cadence she used under stress. "Gregory Voss, landlord, has cut power and blocked stairwell egress. He is offering rent cancellation in exchange for a private meeting at his penthouse office." Voss's eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Documenting." He lunged one step up, faster than she expected, and struck the phone from her hand. It clattered against concrete, screen flashing once before skidding under the rail. He caught her right wrist as she bent for it, fingers crushing her wrist, the bone that would later need a splint. Pain shot to her elbow. Her keys dropped and rang down 3 steps. "Do not record me," he said, smile gone. "Do you understand me?" She gasped and twisted, trying to turn with his grip instead of against it the way an ER security guard had once taught her. "Let go, then be practical." His voice stayed low, almost tender, which made it worse. "You're alone. No one is coming." A tone chimed from somewhere under the railing. Message sent. Then another, rapid from the app's upload confirmation before the screen went black. Voss heard it too. His gaze snapped downward. "Who did you send that to?" Isabella drove her left shoulder into his chest, not hard enough to throw him, hard enough to break his stance for half a second. She yanked free and stumbled down 2 steps, grabbing the rail with her injured hand and nearly blacking out from pain. He caught the back of her coat and dragged her 1 step up again. Headlights washed across the stairwell window in a sudden white sweep. Then another set. Engines, heavy and synchronized, rolled to a stop at both ends of the block. Voss froze. Doors opened below, multiple at once. Boots hit wet pavement. A radio clicked. Isabella didn't see the street, only the rectangular burst of light through dirty glass and Voss's face-changing shape as calculation replaced certainty. He released her coat and pulled out his phone. No signal icon. He cursed under his breath and started down toward the lobby, moving fast now, not composed. She followed because the alternative was being trapped above. Her knees buckled on the last landing. She caught herself on the wall and tasted copper where she'd bitten her cheek. In the lobby, fluorescent lights snapped back to full brightness, too harsh after the dark. Rainwater pushed in under the front door in thin streams across tile. Black SUVs boxed the curb in both directions, engines idling. Men in dark, weatherproof jackets moved with controlled speed, not shouting, not panicking, each one already assigned. At their center stood a tall man in a charcoal overcoat, cut clean through the shoulders. Black gloves, no umbrella despite the rain. He didn't need introduction. The room rearranged around him. Luca DeSantis stepped through the doorway, rain beating on his coat collar, dark eyes taking in the scene in one pass. Voss near the mailboxes, Isabella on the last stair gripping the rail, her phone half visible through the lower banister, the dead hallway light. The building manager peering from the office with his face drained white. His voice carried without strain, controlled rage barely contained. Lock the stairwell. Medical up. Nobody touches her again. 2 security men moved immediately. One between Isabella and Voss, one up the stairs to secure the upper landings. Another crouched and retrieved her phone, checking the cracked screen before placing it in a clear evidence sleeve. In the same motion, a woman in a Navy medical jacket approached Isabella with a compact kit and a calm expression that read, "Hospital trained, not hired theatrics." "I'm Dr. Hale," she said. "Can I see your wrist?" Isabella nodded once, then looked past her as Voss tried to recover his smile. "Mr. DeSantis, this is an overreach," Voss said, spreading his hands. "Private housing matter. Tenant instability. I can explain." Luca did not look at him right away. He climbed 3 steps toward Isabella and stopped at her eye level rather than forcing her to look up. "Can you stand?" he asked. "Yes." "Any head impact?" "No." "Good. Stay where you are." Only then did he turn to Voss. "You can explain to counsel." A thin man in a dark suit appeared from the second SUV with 2 associates and a leather case already open. "Civil detention protocol is active," he said to Voss in clipped professional diction. You will remain present pending law enforcement arrival. Attempt to leave, and we file immediate flight risk affidavits and emergency injunctive relief on asset transfer. You can't detain me, Voss snapped. I can advise every officer who arrives that you tampered with utilities and evidence while physically coercing a tenant. The attorney replied, Try me. By midnight, the lobby had become a command post, built out of clipboards, body cams, and wet footprints. One security tech mirrored building camera feeds to 2 encrypted drives before management could access the server room. The receptionist from earlier arrived in a raincoat, pale and shaking, and handed over a phone full of time-stamped messages after being assured on record that her statement would be protected. The valet came 10 minutes later with his supervisor, hands still trembling, and identified 3 prior nights when Voss had ordered corridor cameras disabled on specific floors. Each detail was logged, signed, backed up. Isabella sat on a folding chair near the mailboxes while Dr. Hale examined her wrist under bright penlight. Sprain, maybe hairline fracture, the doctor said softly. I'm splinting now. You'll need imaging tonight. The rigid brace went on with clean efficiency. Pain sharpened, then settled into a hot throb that matched her pulse. She watched raindrops slide down Luca's coat sleeve as he spoke in low tones with his security chief, then with the attorney, then with a uniformed patrol sergeant who had just entered and was reading from a printed packet that seemed to have assembled itself out of thin air. Live audio transcript, prior notice chain, payroll coercion reports from 2 former employees, and flagged rent filings cross-referenced to shell entities. Marta arrived at 12:18 a.m., hair rain-flattened, messenger bag soaked, expression fierce. She knelt beside Isabella, checked the splint, then looked up at Luca with professional caution. I represent Miss Nakamura. All interviews go through me unless she consents. Luca gave a single nod. Understood. No contest, no posturing, just protocol. Police took Voss into custody at 12:31. He tried one last smooth line while cuffs closed around his wrists. You're misunderstanding a negotiation, the patrol sergeant answered without looking up from his notes. Save it for arraignment. When they let him out, the lobby exhaled in small sounds. A receptionist's shaky breath, elevator cables humming back to life, rain softening from assault to steady fall. Isabella didn't realize she'd been clenching her jaw until it began to ache. Luca returned to the stair where she sat, lowered himself to a crouch so they were level again, and spoke quietly enough that only she and Marta could hear. Your upload hit 3 endpoints, he said. Attorney intake, my compliance desk, and external retention. It was the right move. She swallowed against a dry throat. I didn't know if anyone would see it. I saw it. His gaze held hers, direct and unwavering. From this moment, you do not meet anyone from that company alone. You do not answer unknown building summons, and you do not walk these halls without escort until the injunction is filed. Do you understand me? Isabella looked past him at the lobby glass, where rain streaked the city into blurred light, then back at the man who had turned a predatory midnight into a documented case in less than an hour. Fear was still in her bloodstream, sharp and cold, but it no longer stood by itself. Yes, she said, voice rough. I understand. You are under my protection now, Luca said, each word measured like a contract. Nobody touches you again. Isabella held his gaze for a second longer, then felt the tremor return to her knees as the adrenaline bled out of her system. Marta rose first, already in command of her own perimeter, and lifted a hand toward the nearest officer. My client gives a full statement after imaging and pain control, she said. Not in a lobby at midnight with the suspect 10 feet away. You'll get cooperation, you'll get detail, and you'll get it in sequence. The patrol sergeant nodded. Understood. Luca stood and turned to his security chief, a broad-shouldered man with rain darkening the collar of his jacket. Neri, 4th floor and roof access stay locked. 2 people on the rear stair, 1 on main. No resident is blocked from movement, but no unscheduled entry to 4B. Utility panel gets photographed before anyone touches it. Chain of custody starts now. Yes, sir. Get a female officer or female security lead for apartment retrieval. On it. Find out who killed the hall lights and when. Neri tapped his earpiece and moved, and the lobby shifted with him. Orders traveled fast and quiet, not shouted, not theatrical. A tech in gloves headed for the basement panel with a body camera already active. Another security officer placed numbered evidence tags along the mailroom counter, where phones and printed copies were being staged. A uniformed cop stood by the front door, logging names as residents drifted into the hall in slippers and robes, whispering to each other while rain thudded against the glass. Dr. Hale adjusted Isabella's splint, then checked capillary refill at her fingers. Any numbness now? Less than before. Pain level? 7. The doctor gave a short nod and spoke to Marta and Luca as if they were both part of one difficult protocol. She needs x-rays tonight. If there's a fracture, delayed treatment will complicate swelling. I can manage immediate pain and stabilization here. But she needs imaging and documentation in a clinical setting. Public hospital, Marta said instantly. Document trail stays neutral. Luca inclined his head. Agreed. Take 2 vehicles. 1 with her, 1 ahead. Isabella drew a breath that caught in her throat. My apartment keys. Recovered, Neri said from 3 steps away, holding up a clear evidence pouch with her ring inside. We logged where they fell. My folder is upstairs. My ID, Wren's clinic paperwork, everything. You're not going upstairs alone, Marta said. I wasn't planning to. Luca's voice was low, precise. You and counsel go with Officer Delgado and my female lead. 3 minutes in, 3 minutes out. Door condition photographed before and after. If there's forced entry, nobody touches the lock. Marta looked at him, measuring him, then gave one curt nod. That works. By 12:52 a.m., Isabella climbed back to 4B between a uniformed officer and a woman in black tactical rain gear with a braid tucked under her collar. The hallway lights were on again, but the corridor felt thinner than before, as if the building itself was listening. Her door stood slightly ajar. Officer Delgado photographed the latch, frame, and strike plate, while the security lead dictated timestamps. A fresh scrape marked the metal where tool pressure had slipped. Not enough to break in, enough to prove intent. Inside, the apartment was cold and stale, refrigerator still silent from the outage. Isabella crossed to the table and took the red notice, her laptop, 2 chargers, her ID wallet, and the gray folder with Wren's dialysis schedule clipped inside. She hesitated at the sink, then added the bruised apples she had wrapped earlier, because habit was sometimes the only thing stronger than fear. The officer checked each room. Clear. On the way out, Isabella paused by the door and looked at the deadbolt. The chipped paint, the life she had kept together in this narrow space with overtime and strict math. The security lead noticed and spoke gently without softening the facts. We can place a temporary door brace tonight. Tomorrow, new cylinder and smart contact sensor. Your consent only. Isabella nodded once. Do it. When they returned to the lobby, Luca was on the phone near the windows, rain striping the city lights behind him. File the emergency petition before dawn, he said into the receiver. I want utility tampering, coercive tenancy conduct, and witness intimidation in the same package. Yes, include the payroll trail. He listened, jaw tight, then added, no press leak, not one line. He ended the call and looked directly at Isabella's splinted wrist before he looked at her face. Cars ready? At the curb, the storm had eased to a hard mist. Wet asphalt reflected red brake lights in broken ribbons. Luca's lead vehicle pulled out first, and Isabella slid into the second beside Marta, with Dr. Hale across from them and Officer Delgado up front. Luca took the passenger seat in the same SUV without asking permission and without crowding her. One arm braced on the console, eyes scanning mirrors and side streets with disciplined, sleepless focus. They crossed the bridge in near silence, except for radio traffic and wiper rhythm. Isabella stared at her own reflection in the dark glass. Pale skin, damp hair escaping her knot, hospital exhaustion layered under fresh shock. She unlocked her phone and sent Ren a message with one hand. Running late after shift issue. Phone on. You sleep. He answered almost immediately. You okay? She looked at the blinking cursor for a long second. Yes. Wrist sprain. Lawyer with me. I'll call in the morning. She hit send before she could edit the truth into something smaller. At 1:17 a.m., they reached the emergency department entrance, where fluorescent light flattened everything into clinical clarity. Marta handled registration with practiced speed, making sure assault and coercion were entered in the intake narrative, and that the police incident number attached to the chart. Dr. Hale transferred care to the overnight resident and gave a concise handoff that included mechanism of injury, timing, and observed swelling pattern. Luca remained by the waiting area doors with Neri, speaking to staff only when necessary, never stepping into treatment space until Isabella nodded him forward. The X-ray confirmed a non-displaced distal radius fracture. The resident replaced the temporary splint with a molded brace and printed restrictions. No lifting, no strain, follow-up in 5 days. Isabella signed forms with her left hand, while Marta photographed every page for the case file. As the nurse taped discharge instructions to a clipboard, Marta's phone vibrated. She listened, expression sharpening. Good, she said. Email me the acknowledgement and CC both agencies. She ended the call and turned to Isabella. Tenant Hotline Coordinator filed your amended complaint and attached tonight's incident report. The City Housing Unit opened a priority review, not a promise, but its movement. External contact, answered. One line in a long night that had actually held. Back in the waiting alcove, a vending machine hummed beside a wall clock reading 2:06 a.m. Luca stood with his gloves off now, sleeves pushed back enough to show a pale scar crossing the inside of his left wrist, old and cleanly healed. Isabella noticed because she noticed everything when she was tired, and because controlled men rarely carried visible history unless they had stopped trying to hide it. He caught her looking and did not pull his sleeve down. You need food before pain medication, he said. Crackers are not enough. He signaled to Neri. Get soup, rice, water, nothing from a machine. Neri disappeared without question. Marta watched the exchange, then looked at Isabella. I need 10 minutes with the officer for supplemental statement. You okay if I step outside the curtain line? Isabella nodded. I'm okay. When they were briefly alone, except for the low murmur of the department, Luca sat across from her rather than beside her, posture straight, hands quiet on his knees. You were right to push upload to multiple endpoints, he said. Single-channel reporting gets buried. She gave a tired, brittle laugh that held no humor. I built that macro for triage abuse reports. Never thought I'd use it on my landlord. His gaze stayed steady. Predators count on that distinction, They count on people believing housing pressure isn't violence until it escalates. The words settled between them with more weight than volume. Isabella pressed the edge of the discharge papers with her thumb. Why was your compliance desk reading messages at midnight? Because certain key phrases route to a live queue. Like what? Utility shutoff tied to tenancy demands. Private meeting in exchange for arrears. Cooperative tenants. His jaw tightened on the last phrase. Those are not random filters. Isabella watched him for a beat. Who set them? I did. He said it without pride, without performance, just fact. She waited, and for the first time since he stepped into her building, his eyes shifted away from tactical scanning and held on a point over her shoulder, somewhere in the past. When I was 19, he said, voice lower now. My mother was put out of her apartment by a man who called it administrative correction. Legal paper, illegal pressure. Winter week. She was already sick. The hearing came too late. He paused once, controlled enough that most people might have missed the fracture in the silence. Since then, any complaint with those markers routes to someone who can act before dawn. The emergency department noise carried on around them. Monitor beeps, rolling cartwheels, an overhead page for respiratory consult. Ordinary sounds that made the confession feel even starker. Isabella looked at his scar again, then back at his face. I'm sorry, she said quietly. His expression did not soften into sentiment. It sharpened into resolve. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you because you asked who set the filters. I still don't want to owe anyone for being protected. A primary rule between them, stated plain. He accepted it at once. Then don't owe me. Use counsel, use court orders, use documented terms. Protection can run on contract instead of gratitude. Neri returned with 2 containers of broth, plain rice, sealed water, and a paper bag of fruit from a 24-hour deli. He set everything down, then gave Luca a quick update in a low voice. Receptionist agreed to formal affidavit. Valet too. Both asked for anonymity in initial filing. Approved, Luca said. Relocation stipend through legal fund, not my personal accounts. Temporary job placement if requested. Loyalty answered with logistics, not speeches. By 2:43 a.m., Isabella finished half the broth and swallowed her first dose of pain medication. Warmth spread slowly through her chest, taking the edge off the fracture and the shaking. Marta came back with Officer Delgado and reviewed next steps. Recorded statement at daylight, emergency injunction filing, no direct contact with property management, all communications through counsel. Isabella repeated each instruction until Marta was satisfied she would remember even through fatigue. When discharge cleared, Luca stood as she did and waited until she found her balance. You have 2 options tonight, he said. Return to 4B with posted security and a reinforced door, or secure hotel floor under your attorney's name. Your choice. No pressure. She considered the fluorescent hallway, the wet city outside, the thought of surrendering her apartment even for one night. Home, she said. With counsel notified, door reinforced, and no cameras inside. Done. They stepped out into the thinning rain. The sky over Queens had started to pale at the edges, that colorless hour where night was still present, but losing authority. In the car back, Isabella rested her splinted arm against a folded jacket and watched storefront shutters, bus depots, and bakery lights flicker into morning routine. By the time they pulled up to her building, a sanitation truck was grinding down the avenue, and someone on the next block was already opening a bodega gate. The new lock cylinder lay sealed in packaging on a tarp in the lobby, beside a signed installation form with her name at the top and consent lines highlighted. Officer Delgado was still on site. Marta checked the paperwork, then handed Isabella the pen. Isabella signed with her left hand, each letter slow and uneven, and felt the power of the gesture anyway. Not rescued, not managed. Documented, witnessed, and binding. Luca waited near the front doors while the contractor installed the lock under camera recording. He didn't step into her hallway when she went up. He didn't ask to. At her threshold, with dawn finally thinning the rain into mist, he gave one last instruction in the same measured tone he had used all night. Sleep when you can. Keep your phone charged. If protocol fails, call me first and counsel second. Marta shot him a dry look. Counsel first. A brief nod from Luca. Counsel first. Isabella looked from one to the other, exhaustion pressing behind her eyes, fear still present but no longer shapeless. I'll call both, she said, and closed the new lock with a clean metallic click that sounded, for the first time in days, like a door that belonged to her. The lock settled with a clean metallic click, and Isabella kept her hand on the knob for a long second, as if pressure alone could hold the night outside. The apartment smelled like cold plaster and damp cotton, the faint medicinal trace from her hospital bag still clinging to the chair by the table. Through the door, she could hear muted movement in the hallway. Boots, low voices, a drill motor starting for a moment and stopping again. But inside 4B, the silence pressed in around her. Heavy and intimate. The kind that made her aware of every pulse beat in her splinted wrist. She set her folder down, then leaned her spine against the door and closed her eyes. Her body finally took inventory now that it believed the immediate threat had passed. Jaw pain from clenching, stomach hollow from missed meals, shoulder burning where she had twisted in the stairwell, and a deep tremor traveling from her ribs to her thighs that no breathing pattern fully calmed. She wanted sleep so badly it hurt. She wanted control more. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket, and the vibration jolted through her like an alarm. Marta, open if you're dressed. Need signatures before I leave. Isabella unlocked the door and stepped back. Marta came in first with a plastic document sleeve and a to-go coffee gone cold. Luca remained in the hallway beside the half-installed lock hardware, speaking quietly to Neri, while rain-misted dawn turned the corridor window pale gray. He did not cross the threshold. He looked up once, met Isabella's eyes, then lowered his gaze to the paperwork in Marta's hand, as if to make the boundary explicit. Emergency filing packet, Marta said, spreading pages on the table. Temporary restraining relief, utility tampering addendum, witness protection request for staff. Sign here, here, and here. Left hand is fine, just legible. Isabella signed slowly, each letter dragged and uneven. Do I have to move out while this is pending? No. That's the point of this filing. We freeze retaliatory action. Marta slid the next page forward. He or his agents contact you directly. You don't answer, you document. Through the open door, Luca said, one change to protocol. Marta lifted an eyebrow. If this starts with, I insist, I'm billing extra. It starts with risk assessment. He stepped just close enough to be heard without forcing presence. Her hallway blind spot remains at the rear stair camera. I want temporary motion sensors on both approaches. Audio alarm only inside this unit. No video inside. Isabella looked at him. Who can access the sensor data? Neri and one licensed tech, Luca said. Or no one if you decline installation. She held his gaze, feeling the same unstable mix she had felt in the hospital alcove when he told her about his mother. Relief so immediate it bordered on weakness, and resistance just as sharp, because dependence had always arrived dressed as help before collecting its price. I don't decline safety, she said. I decline being watched. If I approve sensors, logs copy to my lawyer in real time. Marta's mouth curved by a fraction. Now you're speaking my dialect. Luca nodded once. Accepted. The agreement settled in the room like a line of chalk, narrow, deliberate, and hers to keep. When Marta gathered the papers and headed for the door, she paused with her hand on the frame. I need to file these before court opens. Sleep if you can. Eat before meds, and answer me on first call, not fifth. She glanced at Luca. You don't enter unless invited. His answer came without delay. Understood. After Marta left, the contractor finished the lock and packed his tools while Officer Delgado logged serial numbers. Neri supervised the sensor installation with clipped, procedural language, then gave Isabella 2 sealed cards. Emergency contacts, incident code, legal hotline. By the time the hallway emptied, daylight had reached full strength, flat and damp through the rain-streaked window. Luca was still there, coat off now. Dark shirt sleeves rolled to his forearms, droplets drying on his hair. He looked less distant without the overcoat, and somehow more dangerous for it, all controlled movement and contained force. You should rest, he said. You should leave, she answered, then heard the rough edge in her voice and added, not as an insult, as a boundary. A subtle shift crossed his face, not wounded, not offended, only attentive. Do you want me gone from the building or gone from your hallway? Both, after one thing. She opened the door wider. 2 minutes, at the table, no guards. He entered only when she stepped aside, and he sat where she indicated, hands visible on the tabletop, eyes scanning exits out of habit before settling on her. Up close, he smelled of rainwater and clean wool and the bitter coffee someone had handed him hours ago. Isabella stayed standing, needing the small advantage. I won't trade one form of pressure for another, she said. Not from Voss, not from courts, not from you. If you fund something, I need paper trails. If your people secure this building, I need written duration. If this is about leverage later, end it now. His response was quiet enough that she had to lean slightly to catch it. If this were about leverage, I'd have asked for gratitude by now. I haven't. That doesn't answer me. It does, but I'll answer directly. He held her eyes, steady and unsmiling. You owe me nothing personal. Protection terms can be drafted through counsel and terminated by counsel. You keep your own lawyer. You keep your own apartment. You keep your choices. My role is force against the people who hurt you, not force against you. Her throat tightened with an emotion she did not want to name, because naming made it real. You make that sound simple. It isn't. A faint tension moved in his jaw. Trust is not a switch. It's protocol under stress. Despite the exhaustion grinding behind her eyes, a brittle laugh escaped her. That might be the least romantic sentence anyone has said to me. For the first time, the corner of his mouth shifted. Good. I'm not asking for romance. The answer hit harder than flirtation would have, because it left no place to hide behind banter. Isabella sat across from him and wrapped her left hand around a glass of tap water gone lukewarm. She noticed the pale scar on his inner wrist again, where his sleeve had ridden back, and the way he did not conceal it. Attraction moved through her in a non-trivial, unwelcome wave. Physical, immediate, bound up with fear and gratitude and anger until she could not separate one current from another. She set the glass down before her hand shook. Then we proceed like this, she said. Legal first, facts first. If you need to communicate with me, copy Marta. No unannounced visits to my home. Agreed. No one speaks to my brother? A harder edge entered his voice. No one had authorization to contact him. I'm saying it anyway. And I'm hearing it. His gaze darkened, focused. Do you understand me when I say this? If anyone connected to Voss uses your brother's name, they become my problem before they become yours. The possessive force in the words made her pulse kick once, sharp and traitorous. She held his eyes until the beat passed. That tone, she said softly. That's exactly what scares me. He absorbed that without flinching. It should scare the right people. He stood before she could answer, stepping back from the table to restore space. I'll be downstairs for 1 hour while filings clear intake. After that, perimeter is Delgado and City Patrol until court order lands. You are not alone in this building today. By late morning, the rain had thinned to a cold mist that filmed the windows and made every sound in the hallway seem farther away. Isabella did not sleep. She showered one-handed, changed into dry black leggings and an old university sweatshirt, reheated rice she barely tasted, and laid her phone, charger, legal folder, and medication in a straight line on the table. At 11:26, Marta texted, "Petition filed. Clerk accepted. Awaiting judge review." At 11:41, Wren sent a single message, "You awake?" And she replied with careful normality, "No shift tonight. Rest day. Proud of you." She put the phone down before he could ask harder questions. At 12:08 p.m., the buzzer panel in her apartment crackled to life. "Delivery for 4B, a male voice said, polished and patient. Legal documents. Isabella froze, then moved to the monitor screen Neri had mounted near her door that morning. A man in a cream raincoat stood in the lobby holding a flat envelope and smiling at the camera. His posture carried the same polished menace she now recognized on sight. Expensive watch, relaxed shoulders, eyes that never stopped measuring. Officer Delgado stood 3 paces away, alert but not yet intervening. Her phone rang at the same moment. Unknown number. She let it go to speaker-ed voicemail. Voss's voice filled her kitchen, smooth as lacquer. "Ms. Nakamura, this can still resolve privately. My associate has terms that protect your dignity. Decline, and public filings become very educational for your family." Her skin went cold. She saved the voicemail, forwarded it to Marta and Delgado, then opened the tenant app Neri had installed and triggered escort required for lobby contact. Strategic action first, panic second. 3 minutes later, Delgado knocked, and Luca's voice sounded from the hall behind him. "Do not open until I'm in visual range." She opened to both men. Luca's expression had gone still in the dangerous way she had seen once already. Command flattening everything human into priorities. "You received contact?" She played the voicemail. Delgado was already writing. Luca's voice was low, barely contained. "He referenced your family while under active detention. That's witness intimidation." In the lobby, the man in the cream raincoat introduced himself as Adrian Kells, special counsel for Voss Holdings, and offered the envelope with 2 fingers as though extending a dinner invitation. "A confidential settlement," he said. "Vacate voluntarily, accept compensation, withdraw sensational allegations. Everyone keeps face." Marta arrived by speakerphone within 30 seconds, her voice cutting through Delgado's body cam audio. "Do not accept service directly. Officer, place that envelope on the counter unopened and photograph both sides." Kells kept smiling. "Ms. Nakamura, these proceedings can be ugly. Medical debt histories, family dependencies, young relatives with strict treatment schedules." His eyes flicked to Isabella with practiced sympathy. "Courts are public." Luca stepped between them, not touching her, but blocking Kells's line entirely. You will not say her brother's name. You will not imply access. You will speak to counsel, or you will leave in cuffs. Kells's smile thinned. Mr. DeSantis, this is a legal discussion. No. Luca's gaze did not move. This is coercion, wrapped in stationery. Isabella felt fear rise, clean and sharp, but this time it did not pin her in place. She stepped to Luca's shoulder, where Kells could see her clearly, and spoke before either man continued. Officer Delgado, add this to my statement. Implied threat tied to protected testimony and family medical status. Mr. Kells, you do not contact me again outside counsel channels. You do not come to this address. You do not send messages through building staff. Boundary is now on record. Kells looked at her as if recalculating the room. You're making this bigger than necessary. I'm making it visible, she said. Delgado took the envelope with gloved hands and placed it in an evidence sleeve. Sir, step back from the desk. Kells exhaled through his nose, annoyance finally surfacing beneath the polish. Fine. We proceed publicly. Luca's answer was ice. Proceed anywhere you like. She is under my protection and under court review and under counsel. You try this again, I add your name to the filing myself. For a beat, the lobby held absolute quiet. Rain tapping the glass, elevator cables humming, the receptionist at her station gone perfectly still. Then Kells adjusted his cuffs, offered a final expressionless nod, and left through the front doors into gray daylight, where a patrol car idled at the curb. Delgado radioed the incident in, requested immediate notation to the morning petition, and handed Isabella a card with supplemental report number written in thick blue ink. External contact, outcome logged. Distinctive detail, captured. Loaded threat, answered. When the doors shut behind Kells, Isabella's knees weakened with delayed reaction. Luca turned toward her, voice dropping from command to something quieter but no less firm. Look at me. She did. Breathe in, hold, out. He paced her through 2 cycles until the tunnel in her hearing receded. Good. I hate that this is my normal now, she said, hating that her voice shook. It won't be. His hand hovered near her elbow, waiting for consent. When she gave a tiny nod, he steadied her briefly, then let go at once. The line is drawn. They cross it again. Consequences escalate. She believed him. That certainty frightened her almost as much as the threat had, because belief was the first door trust walked through. Yet, as she stood in her own lobby with her lawyer on speaker, an officer finishing reports, and the man who could terrify rooms choosing restraint because she had demanded it, she felt the underlying balance shift again. Not toward surrender, but toward a framework she could test, clause by clause, breath by breath. At 12:47 p.m., with rain easing and the first break of pale sunlight catching in the lobby glass, Isabella took the evidence receipt from Delgado, confirmed Marta had it by text, and walked back upstairs under escort, her spine straighter than it had been at dawn. Luca did not follow her past the 3rd-floor landing. He stopped at the turn, looked up once, and said in that same measured tone, "No one comes to your door without your permission again." This time, when she answered, her voice was steady. "Make sure they understand I said it first." Luca held her gaze from the landing below and gave a single nod that looked almost like a bow. "They already do," he said, then turned to Officer Delgado. "Log her statement as primary instruction." He did not follow her up. Isabella climbed the last flight alone, shut herself inside 4B, and leaned against the new lock while her phone vibrated with 3 incoming alerts in a row. Marta confirming supplemental filing received, the city housing unit assigning a case number, and DeSantis Compliance sending a formal preservation notice that every upload from 11:47 p.m. had been hashed, duplicated, and transferred to independent counsel. She screenshot all three and forwarded them into the evidence thread before she let herself sit down. At 4:22 that afternoon, Marta called on speaker while Isabella sat at her kitchen table with ice wrapped around her brace. "Judge Ramos gave us emergency relief," Marta said. "Temporary restraining order granted. No contact, no eviction action. Utilities protected under court supervision." Paper rustled on Marta's end. "And there's more. The city inspector tied your hallway blackout to manual panel tampering. Timestamp aligns with your recording. That weird flicker you described is now evidence, not anecdote." Isabella closed her eyes, absorbing it in her body before her mind caught up. The envelope from Kells? Opened under police observation. Settlement terms included gag language and a release of civil claims in exchange for vacating in 7 days. Threat by contract. It's in the packet as witness intimidation support. The receptionist and valet? Both gave sworn statements. She hid her phone because Voss made staff surrender devices during tenant escalations. She kept a second one in her desk to preserve his texts. The valet's shaking was fear, not uncertainty. Voss threatened to report him over visa paperwork if he refused corridor shutoff requests. Marta paused, then added, "You noticed the right things." 2 days later, at 9:06 a.m., Isabella stood in a packed injunction courtroom with rain still clinging to everyone's coats and watched Gregory Voss try to wear confidence like armor. He sat beside private counsel in a tailored suit that made him look like the same polished man from the Marble office, except for the ankle monitor visible when he crossed his legs and the fatigue around his mouth that expensive fabric could not hide. Luca sat in the second row behind Marta. Dark suit, still posture, attention fixed on Isabella rather than on Voss. He had promised distance unless invited, and he kept it. Present without intrusion, the hearing moved fast and brutal. Marta submitted the cracked phone in an evidence sleeve, the extracted audio transcript, the utility panel photographs, the mirrored camera logs with chain of custody signatures, Kells's envelope and threat voicemail, and rent ledgers that showed tripled notices concentrated on tenants flagged with medical debt. The city attorney entered the hotline reports Isabella had made at 7:41 a.m. and 11:06 a.m., establishing predation before the stairwell assault. Detective Park testified that the hallway footsteps report, power cutoff, and physical obstruction matched the sequence from her live memo down to the minute. Then Marta called the receptionist. She sat rigid at the witness stand, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles blanched. "I slid my phone under the desk when Ms. Nakamura approached because Mr. Voss watched our screens from his office camera," she said. "I had already photographed internal messages. He used cooperative tenants as code for off-record meetings." Her voice trembled only once. "I didn't speak earlier because I thought I'd lose my job. I kept records anyway." The valet testified next, shoulders shaking even in a clean shirt and borrowed tie. "He told me to kill hall lights on 4th floor when specific units were under review," he said. "If I refused, he'd call immigration and say my documents were fake. I did it twice. I'm ashamed of it." When Marta asked about the 2 suited men in Voss's office that morning, he named them Leonard Pike and Aaron Bale, representatives for a financing partner tied to Voss's shell entities. Subpoenas had reached both. Pike appeared and invoked his right against self-incrimination. Bale never appeared and was later noted as non-compliant in the record. Isabella watched the clerk type each word, watched silence become notation. When it was her turn, she stood with her splinted wrist resting against the witness rail and told the timeline in clean, interpreter-precise sequence. She gave times, phrases, and body positions. She explained why she built the upload macro for hospital abuse reporting and why she used it in the stairwell. She identified 6 units that had received market correction notices after medical collection flags. She named forged ledger entries and retaliatory emails. She did not cry. She did not soften language to make anyone comfortable. Voss requested to speak before ruling. He rose, smiling as if charm could still bend structure. Your Honor, this is a misunderstanding amplified by people with private agendas. Tenants like Ms. Nakamura are emotional under financial strain. People like her fold when facts settle. Luca stood before Marta Could, voice low and barely contained. Not this woman. Judge Ramos struck the bench once for order, then looked directly at Isabella. Ms. Nakamura, anything further relevant to falsified records? She answered without looking at Voss. Yes, Your Honor. Exhibit 43 through 51 show account ledgers altered after notice service. Metadata timestamps place the edits at 2:13 a.m. and 2:19 a.m. after he claimed files were locked. The originals were preserved through mirrored drives from the lobby server before deletion could complete. The judge reviewed in silence, then issued rulings from the bench. Permanent injunction, immediate transfer of building operations to a court monitor, suspension of Voss licenses pending criminal disposition, and tenant restitution escrow funded by frozen assets. Gasps moved through the gallery when she added, Ms. Nakamura is appointed paid resident liaison under court oversight for 90 days, renewable upon review, compensation set at professional rate. 3 weeks later, on a clear Thursday in November, Isabella stood in the lobby that no longer smelled like cedar cologne and signed her first weekly oversight report at the same counter where she had once been dismissed. The new property manager, a blunt woman named Elaine Cho, reviewed open maintenance tickets in front of tenants instead of behind closed doors. Mrs. Cardenas from 2A had heat restored and back credits posted. Mr. Yoon from 5C received corrected rent statements. The rear stair camera blind spot was fixed, documented, and tested in front of residents. Every new notice required dual signatures and posted legal citations. Protocol became visible. Ren sat in one of the lobby chairs with a dialysis clinic sweatshirt and a bag of pretzels, watching his sister move through forms and questions like she had always belonged at the center of the room. His treatment coordinator had already called that morning. Restitution funds cleared first disbursement, his co-pays covered through the year, transport vouchers approved. He waited until the residents thinned, then said quietly, You look tired. I am tired. You also look taller. She laughed once, surprised by it. That might be the brace making me stand straight. He looked toward the front doors where Lucas spoke with Neri near the curb, then back at her. Is he safe? The question was so 16 and so sharp that Isabella took a second before answering. He is dangerous in the right direction, she said, and he follows rules when I set them. Ren nodded as if filing that for future use. Then I can work with that. By the second week of December, Voss entered a guilty plea on extortion, assault, unlawful surveillance, and witness intimidation enhancements tied to Kels's contact attempt. Sentencing happened in a wood-paneled courtroom without cameras, just fluorescent hum and winter light. Isabella sat beside Marta and held the restitution order when the judge read it aloud. Convictions entered, licenses permanently revoked, barred from property management, mandatory payments to all identified tenants, and referral for further financial fraud prosecution involving Pike and Bale. Kels lost his advisory credentials and faced separate charges for coercive contact under active protective order. Every call, every email, every report she had filed appeared in the sentencing packet index with a checkmark beside outcome. Afterward, in the courthouse corridor, Isabella asked Marta the question that had lived in her chest for weeks. Did we miss anything? Marta scanned the checklist one last time. No abandoned threads. Utility tampering resolved. Witness statement secured. Investors addressed in record. Envelope admitted. Voicemail prosecuted. Hotline reports closed with action. Camera mirrors archived at 2 independent firms. Your old keys are logged and released if you want them back, but I'd frame them instead of using them. Isabella smiled, small and real. Frame them. That night, rain started again. Light this time, silver against street lamps. Isabella finished her resident liaison shift, climbed to 4B, and locked the door that now carried a brass plate with her unit number and a new deadbolt that turned without sticking. She set the restitution documents in a labeled file box beside Wren's medical folder and the original red notice, now stamped Evidence Released. She placed the cracked stairwell phone in a drawer after forensics cleared it for return. Physical artifacts accounted for, no longer controlling the room. Her buzzer sounded once. She checked the monitor before answering. Luca stood in the lit street below, coat dark with rain at the shoulders, hands empty and visible. No emergency, he said through the intercom. I'm here because a court closed the criminal side today, and I wanted to ask before assuming anything. She came downstairs on her own, stepped onto the front stoop, and let the mist settle on her hair. For a moment, neither spoke. Traffic hissed at the corner. Someone laughed from the bodega doorway. The city moved around them, indifferent and alive. You kept your word, she said. So did you. I said legal first. You did. She looked at him fully, at the scar he no longer hid, at the man who could silence rooms and had learned to wait outside her door until invited. Safety was never the same thing as trust for me, she said. Now they can live in the same building. That's new. His expression shifted, not triumphant, simply attentive. What do you want next? She felt the weight of the question and answered without rushing. Dinner tomorrow. Public place. My choice. No bodyguards at the table. You can sit where I can see the exits. A faint breath of relief crossed his face, almost invisible. Done. She lifted her chin toward the building behind her. And if your world brings pressure to this address again, I don't get moved. The pressure does. It will. She believed him again, and this time belief did not feel like surrender. It felt like a negotiated future with clauses she had written herself. Isabella stepped back under the awning, key already in hand, and gave him a final look that carried warning and invitation in equal measure. Good night, Luca. Good night, Isabella. She went upstairs, turned her lock, and stood at the window long enough to watch him wait until her light came on before he finally walked away.